Welcome to the second episode of Bimcast by Catenda, a podcast series about open BIM and digitalization in the construction industry. My name is Håvard Brekke Bell. I'm CEO of Catenda. We will invite knowledgeable and inspiring guests into Bimcast to talk about open BIM, digitization experiences, and hopefully learn a bit or two about how to move forward with your own digitization process. So today's topic is Norway versus France. It's a bit of a fun setup, but we have here in the studio two very interesting guests. Rupert Hanna from Norwegian Byggtjeneste, former SKANSKA, and Julien Benoit from Legendre in France. Both have background in construction companies, and we're really looking forward to hear about your experiences today. But to start it off, Julien, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So my name is Julien Benoit. I'm working for a construction company in France named Groupe Legendre, and I'm the head of the Preconstruction team, which embrace coordination process on construction sites, method and planning, like phasing for the construction, and also all that is around BIM management on projects. And I always worked in a construction company. In a time, I spent 15 years in Bouygues, one of the top leader in the world. And I have a background also, I spent 8 years on construction site as a site manager. So I come from the field in a way, and I then moved to the design process and studies.
Welcome to Bimcast.
Thank you.
So Rupert, Hanna, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. So I'm now working for Norwegian Byggtjeneste as Chief Digitalization Officer and managing the BIM department there. I've recently moved from SKANSKA, where I had various roles, both management and operative roles, always focused around BIM and open BIM. And digitalization. Some of the time working as a coordinator, later on working as manager of the department of BIM, and then finally managing design as a design manager on one of our biggest projects. So my journey has been about following the kind of digital BIM revolution through SKANSKA and implementing it into the organization.
Welcome to Bimcast, Rupert, and thank you both for coming. It's really exciting for me because I know you from way back, and I have been interacting with you on various occasions, and I have the impression that you're very knowledgeable, both of you. You have a deep understanding of how you can exploit the digital processes and so forth. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about your experiences and how that's been going and get a conversation going. I think we'll start with something that I when you talked, Julien, about being having a pre-construction phase. Could you talk a little bit about how you guys do that in Legendre?
Yeah, sure. We have a commitment of being more efficient on sites because it's not a secret that the profits in the construction industry are not very high for construction companies compared to the brokers and owners and stuff like that. So we have to be, when we make an offer to a client and we offer a fixed price most of the time, we have to be sure that the benefit in the end will be there as planned. So the more effort we will put on the pre-construction phase to be sure that the efficiency will be just as planned on studies will actually happen on site, then it's an investment that will guarantee the profit in the end for the construction project in a way. So that's why we put so much effort, I would say, in the pre-construction phase without harming anyone because it's digital, so we can redo it anytime. But once we are on site, it's concrete, it's steel, it's wood, and it takes a lot of time and effort to just correct things and make changes. So that's why we do that.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you actually do in the pre-construction phase? How you, how do you prepare? What do you do?
We are doing the main planning for the construction. When will it start? When should it end? How much effort will we put every week? How many workers? What the tools we will use? How many cranes we will use? And stuff like that, to just be sure we will be ready on time to start, and we will be finished on time as well. And then when it comes, this is the macro view in a way. And when we go deeper in details, we make a model breakdown, like we cut the model into pieces, and we start from the bottom to the top most of the time, even if it's not always the case. And we just make sure that we have the correct pace on site. If it's 3 columns a day or 5, it makes a difference in the end. So we just try to break down the model so that it matches the global planning in a way. And then we are sure that if we start that week, we, in most of the case, will end as planned. And then we guarantee that the construction process is fine.
So do you always make or meet your targets and goals, or do you deviate from that? Or
no, we do deviate, of course, because that's life, and it's some decision involved and errors, and we are building things outside. We are under the weather conditions, wind, snow, rain, so it should be included in a way as variables in the planning, in the main planning, so we can adjust this. But what we need to be sure of is that when we plan to have 25 workers for each tower crane, it needs to be enough to produce what we have to produce, because else we will be late. So we tried, and we're doing good on some trains, I would say, because we are producing from in-house, like the core, the shell, and the core of the buildings are most of the time our workers. And we have a great efficiency around that, and it gets more difficult when it involves subcontractors. Then it's a bit more like managing them on site.
So I wonder if I could ask a question about how do you use the information and models that you work on in pre-construction to communicate with the customer? Because I imagine, in construction we often experience that a plan needs to be changed because of something unforeseen. And do you use the information that you pick up in the pre-construction planning to then communicate with the customer about these issues, about potential changes and things like that?
Yes, we do. We do what most of the time we underline deadlines. Like some changes and updates are allowed until a certain point, and after this point is reached, no change is allowed. So it's more like a warning in a way. We have a global planning, and we make some decisions from the start, and then when people and customers and clients want to update things, we say, okay, that's allowed until this date, and after that, that's not allowed anymore, or else it's extra delay and extra money.
So I guess the open BIM gives you a much better visual tool to communicate with the customer.
Of course, that's the way we can share everything about the design and construction process to our customer and client. Because when you have just a flat drawing, that doesn't mean anything about the way we will build things. But when we have a model that is available on the platform as BIMsync, even the final user of the building, of the facility, has access to what we are doing and how we do it, step by step, level by level, phase by phase. So we can definitely share a lot more information with them, so they can get why we have deadlines, why we have these points to achieve.
What sort of response do you get from these customers when you're then showing them a new set of tools for managing?
I think they get a better understanding of the complexity of a building, because when you are living in a building, when it's a good design, you don't notice all that is inside in the background in a way. You don't see the pipes, you don't see the ventilation system, you don't see anything because it's just comfy. You're just in a room and you're fine, like today. But when you can break down the model into trades and you can show them how much information is into the framing system, the shell, the elevator system, and everything like that, they can see, wow, that's complex. It's not a simple core and shell, it's much more than that. We have a lot of systems. And then they can understand that if we change a system because they didn't decide on a lightning position, it will affect everything until the hole in the concrete wall. Then we say, if you change the lightning, or if you don't decide on the lightning today, then it will be a change in the core, and then we will be late on site.
Or cost money.
Yeah. And then they get it. And if we just issue a flat drawing to just say, this is the level 1 floor plan, they don't see the complexity of it.
This is interesting. So OpenBIM or the digital tools is helping you communicate to the client the complexities of his decision makings or the consequences of his decision makings in terms of money or delays or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think they get, finally, with these models we share, they have an understanding of how complex it is. Because before that, I think they have no clue about how complex is now a building nowadays with all the systems we have inside.
So, sorry, go ahead.
One thing I'm curious about, because in Norway we've been speaking a lot about moving or cutting out drawings for some trades, and a recent development has been to cut out drawings or stop making drawings for the concrete and rebar production, and use models out on the sites. The models are made available to the tradesmen via iPads, and they're able to, instead of having a flat drawing as you described, they're able to then take the iPad and get the information they need on the rebars and see all the bends from all sorts of different angles. And we found that's been a really positive way of engaging a group of tradesmen who've basically been neglected in the digital revolution, because we've been providing them with drawings while we've been enjoying models, and we've just been giving them some junky old drawings. Have you been doing something similar in France or in Legendre to digitalize the everyday life of the tradesmen out on site?
Yes, we had, and from my experience right now, we are not there yet. I think because the people on site have quite a lot of background from using these drawings, and the revolution is a bit like a shock when you say no drawings at all, and now you just have a model. Because the good thing about the drawings is that at one glance you have all the information, and you decide what to pick, instead of a model where you have to investigate, you have to click, you have to select this object and this object to have the information. And that's a cultural revolution for people on the field. And we did have a pilot project where we tried to cut off all the drawings and just do a paperless project. And it didn't went well because people were still asking for the view they are used to, in a way. Yeah. And we also have an issue, because officially what you need to issue to checkers and to client, what is mandatory by contract, is a drawing.
Right.
So we can't totally avoid having drawings in a way, but we are moving it in a way. We are issuing and sharing models until everything is set, and then when it's set, as a result, we produce drawings.
Okay.
But we do use a lot of models on site to just make a location of with stations, to have installation on site, coordinates and stuff like that coming from the models. So it's like a paperless system, but we still have a reference to a drawing right now.
Right.
But
So-
how did you resolve that, Rupert, on your side, with in terms of giving them a model and not the drawing where everything at the glance was available, measurements and all that stuff? How did you resolve that?
There was some skepticism in the start. So what we did is we went to the tradespeople and we showed them the models and said, this is the information that's available in the model. How much of this is relevant? And we broke it down to exactly what they needed to have in the model available to them. So we don't give them, like, for example, the whole model like we're seeing behind us here, but we gave them a broken down model of exactly, basically what we did is we took the drawing process, and made it into a model. And so it's like a drawing you can turn. You've got all the relevant information and none of the irrelevant information. And we've developed a process around that where things are presented with the colors in which are the same in any platform they're looking at it. The information is limited to exactly what's relevant for that trade, and we followed up the tradesmen out on site to help them with the transfer from having no paper and using the iPads or whatever digital platform we were using. So that's the sort of success story was in involving them in the planning and making sure that we're not giving them an information overload and then kind of holding their hands. I mean, some of them really took to it and said, right, this is brilliant, I don't want to see another piece of paper ever again. Others needed a little bit more encouragement, but most of the time we got real good successful results. And we're hoping that this can be then transferred to other trades. It's really interesting to hear that still a requirement in France that you kind of print down the model to a set of drawings. Because we've got a similar situation here in Norway, but some of the big building owners are, for example, Statsbygg, which is a large building owner, state-owned building owner in Norway, are talking about changing the order of documentation to put the model in front of drawings, which is probably going to turn the whole thing on its head. And they're working on that. Interestingly, the last project I was working on, I could still see the relevance of drawings, because so far in BIM we can't model absolutely everything. We still can't model the kind of ceiling between slabs, that sort of thing. If you're putting a wall together and you know that you've got to make it acoustically sound, you're going to put in some strips of insulation and some kind of sealant. We don't model that sort of stuff, but we've got to communicate that it's going to be built, and that's the realm of drawings. So we haven't quite got to a stage where we can cut out all drawings, but we've recognised that there are some trades we can do it on. That's what we're working on.
Yeah, I agree.
Are there any sort of big differences from Norway and France in terms of legal requirements that either pushes you in the digital direction or keeps you in the analog world?
From what I know, I think the main one would be the role of checkers that are mandatory on project in France, and I'm not sure you have this in Norway. And because it's the guys who are the checkers in some big companies in France who are doing this for the entire industry and not only the construction industry, they basically are putting a stamp for the insurances. So they say your design, your process is valid, then the building can be covered by an insurance, then you can use it. And I think this is the main difference. And they are moving to BIM right now, these companies, the checkers, but for years they've been asking for printed drawings to do the job. So how can you just be in a BIM workflow, BIM environment, when people ask you to have 6 copies of the same drawing, black and white, to do their job? So it's been an issue, but now it's moving. So I'm pretty confident that in the 5 coming years, they will be on board, definitely.
So who gets the blame if a building falls down? The checker, the construction company, the insurance company, or
it's
owner?
a judge to decide, but I think it's based on the result of the checkers. If he did a job, he will be charged. If he will be sued if he did a poor job of the checkings, because he has the right to stop the construction if something is not correct.
Yeah.
So that's him who would be charged if something goes wrong. So he.
That's the last time I heard the word checker. I was working in oil and gas industry, and they had basically the same thing there, where the final checkpoint for responsibility is the checker. And these guys were fascinating in the oil and gas industry, because I think they developed basically a 3D model in their heads, and they were able to kind of work out what is it that collides with other stuff. They were quite fascinating in a way. They had a skill which a lot of other people didn't seem to have. And what I see now is that what they could do in the 70s and 80s and 90s with visualizing in their own heads is now what's available to us via BIM. So good to hear that the role is kind of changing for them. Obviously a bit of a challenge, but it's the kind of what they could experience back then just by thinking and coordinating inside their own heads, we can now all experience around in a shared way in front of a screen. I think that's the real revolution in BIM, is that we take the contents of one person's head in a way and we spread it on a screen and see, right, okay, that's what he's talking about. We all understand now.
But I also think that the checkers, among others, because some architects are a bit late in the BIM game, I would say, just because they face some finances issues, because they have a business model that have been running for decades and doing well. And now you are telling them, oh, you have to make a revolution and change everything. So of course they are scared. Of course they don't want to have all their drafters turned into modelers all of a sudden without even knowing what it will give in the end. So they've been a bit reluctant to BIM and models and stuff like that. So just issue drawings, please, because we don't really get that. We are not sure. Because it's a business model behind it. It's not only because they are afraid of making models and checking models. It's also because they have to make money. They have to make money for a living. So that's a bit the issue there as well.
So that's an interesting fact about the drafts people, because something that's happened in Norway recently is the education for a technical draft person has basically really gone. There's not many people taking that education anymore, and to replace it, we've had various schools which have started to run BIM expert educational lines, where they take somebody who's got who's a skilled labourer of some sort or a skilled tradesperson, and give them a year of BIM expertise learning, which then brings them out into the world of being able to draw a trade, but instead of drawing, they're modelling that trade. And that has kind of revolutionised the education system with regard to making sure that we have a set of digital experts ready for drawing in the modern way.
But what's interesting in what you said is that they are taking people from a trade to make him an expert. And that's really smart and interesting, because I know that in France right now some people are pushing a solution to have BIM experts that are rookies, that are just fresh out of school with no trade experience except BIM, and that's a mistake.
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely something that we can talk more about. because this is something which SKANSKA had a great deal of success with, because when this educational line appeared, we employed a lot of people from this. It's called Teknisk Fagskole. I'm just trying to think of what it would be called in English, but we employed quite a few people each year from that, and we found that the people who took that education, they basically everybody got a job, and most of them were with contractors. So the contractors have really enjoyed this educational revolution, if you like.
Yeah, this is something we lack in France, I would say, to just transform existing people that already have a trade and a job into a new expertise and pushing to them new skills, like the running knowledge you have to build on during your career. But I think on the other side, we try to make better with the new people coming on board, like the young people at school. And there's a lot of effort running now in France for the technicians, like 2 years after bachelor. There's a lot of efforts put. They also have like a BIM test in a way at the end of their education. So there are people have a trade training, a solid base, and then they are educated with an extra layer of BIM workflow and BIM knowledge, I would say. And that's people coming then on the market that are really skilled, I would say.
This is very fascinating. I have a question around when you were on the construction side. I know in SKANSKA have been employing something called a BIM kiosk. Could you tell us what a BIM kiosk is and your experiences around it?
Yeah. So the first BIM kiosk that we developed, I think we did the first one in Norway. It came as a result of a requirement on a project from a building owner. Where Startbygg said, we want to have a BIM station on each floor of this particular project, which was a rehab project. So it was perfect because in principle the building was dry, so it was perfect for setting up a network in the building, and they specified they wanted to have a 50-inch screen on this. So we built these, to get the price down, we built these, used a carpenter employed by SKANSKA, and took a 50-inch television screen, connected a small computer to it, put it inside a box on a stand inside this project. We built 5 of them, and at the same time they also required that we were going to be using some kind of tablet with models on. And we kind of scratched our heads thinking, well, you've got a tablet with the model on, what's the point of having a BIM kiosk? And I figured that this is okay, we'll do it, it's in the contract. The interesting thing was that once we set these BIM kiosks up, and again we ran a kind of training program for the tradespeople. The first ones we ran, we offered cakes and coffee and said, come to the BIM kiosk, we'll show you how to use it, and developed a way of making the training relevant for them. So simple things like, okay, which room are you working in? Let's go and have a look at that room in the model. Let's look at all of the trades that are going to be coming into that room and try and work on an issue about coordination, so that you can then, once I've gone and I'm no longer here to help you, you can then navigate to where you're working, find out what's going to be happening in the room after you, so that your trade is not creating some kind of barrier or trouble for the next trades. And it really took off. So after a few of these training sessions, we found that these tradespeople were actually training each other. And I had a few months later, I had a bizarre experience where I went to one of the kiosks, found a guy working there looking for information in the model, I asked him in Norwegian, how's this working for you? No response. I asked in English and understood that he didn't understand English either, but he knew how to go into the BIM kiosk, get the information he needed, and get back to work. So this is where it really took off. We realized that by putting these out on site, we create a collaboration platform, which means that they've got the tradespeople who, as I mentioned earlier, I feel have been neglected. It really outlined how ready they are for the digital revolution. So we haven't looked back since. We've made a few designs so that we can simplify them and actually make them smaller, so you can basically hang them on a wall, and they don't get in the way when you're not using them. So we've got a design which we rolled out to many projects, and they sold like hotcakes basically.
So let me ask you a little bit of a difficult and hard question in this case. Why did it take a client to make you as a construction company deploy a BIM kiosk? Why didn't you come up with that first, since it's working so well?
Yeah, so they had them in SKANSKA USA. We saw some there, and they were huge, and we laughed at them. We thought, well, obviously they've got a lot of space in the US. It's just not a European way of building. So you could see the value of it, but we couldn't see how we could fit them into a residential project, or most of the commercial buildings that we build are still, they don't have the same huge open spaces that you have in American buildings. So, and having the iPad, which we're also distributing models on, that was our chosen methodology at the time. This was about, this was probably about 4 or 5 years ago that we started on this project. So we didn't see the relevance. So that's the client pushing us actually put us into a situation where we had to try it out. So yeah, it is a little bit embarrassing, but it was the fact that the iPad is a personal thing, or the tablet is a personal thing. The BIM kiosk is a collaboration tool. So that's the really big difference, is that 3, 4, maybe even 5 people can have a conversation in front of a piece of relevant information and make a decision.
Very interesting. So have you tried that in France?
Yeah, some companies, and the companies I used to work for, Bouygues, had the same experience and did the same, building their own kiosk with a big screen, a computer, and so forth, and they faced the same issues and troubles at the beginning, because I think the construction site better be dry, so a rehab project is just perfect. There's also trouble with the network and robbery on site as well, because at night it's not always protected and stuff like that. But I think it's not like mandatory yet, and it's not everywhere. So there have been some experiences. I didn't test it personally, but I think it's a good way to share information. What we are doing right now at Legendre is a bit like a BIM kiosk, but we offer this access to models, but in the temporary facilities.
In the site office.
On the site office, because then the site manager can have a discussion with his team like the day before, and they have some notes, and they can have some paper and do sketches and take notes, and they get the information onto the screen all together, as you said, like as a team meeting. What's good about this is that then you need to be prepared. What I really personally don't like with the kiosk is that it's a bit improvisation. You get information once you're there, and it's a bit too late. You better be prepared. That's well, all the concept with the pre-construction is to prepare at least the day before. Then it's better be in the site office. Then it's dry, then it can be protected at night, and then we can still share information. And when there's a project meeting, they are hosted on the site office, you can share the information in front of subcontractors, checkers, clients, owners, and so forth. So that's the same complex concept, I would say, in a different location on site. And this is really efficient nowadays, I think.
So if you were to, based on your own experience in this digital travel, in a sense, how would you, what kind of advice would you give to other construction companies around the world that are now they see, well, we need to do something here. It sounds like a good idea. What's the first step? What's the first attack of?
I'd say the first thing to do is to basically get involved, because this is part of a learning process. Is you can wait for the perfect platform, and you can wait for the perfect piece of software. It will probably never arrive, but start using the tools that are available. Start demanding models on projects. When you get offered a model on project, you use that model, you give it to a BIM expert in your group, or you employ a BIM expert and say, what can you get from me for this model? The things I'm concerned with, for example, quantities, start there. But I like your question, what can construction companies do? When I was working for SKANSKA, I started to talk to people about what can you do as an individual, because most of us are maybe in the middle of our working career, or maybe even at the start of our working career, and it's a fact that digitalization is coming in to all parts of our life, and we've got to embrace it, because we can see what happens to companies who don't embrace it, and organizations who don't embrace the technology. They become less and less relevant, and maybe experience sales that dwindle. So it's actually a really important personal journey. So what I've been trying to say to people is, you've actually got to do the work yourself. You've actually got to take charge of your own destiny, if you like, and get involved in the digitalization, because if you don't, in 10 years' time, your experience is likely to be a whole lot less relevant than somebody else who's next to you with the same age and the same education.
So you said getting engaged, but getting involved. But how do you get involved?
Well, I would say the answer is pretty simple. You have to think about what you're doing as a job, and you have to think that you can deal with models nowadays. The industry and the softwares and the technology is ready for that. So what does it take? If I want to share about my glass that I have on the table with you, I can send you pictures of it, but I can also send you the glass itself as a model, as a digital model. You will get so much more value and information from it. So whatever your job is, if you're a design industry, architectural studio, contractor, anyway, you need a model of something. So to start with, just make models of your trade, whatever you do. This is a starting point.
So that's kind of like a change of mindset then, to stop thinking in terms of whatever drawings or whatever you use, but start thinking that there is a model here, and that's digital information that I can transfer and move and use. And
because anything you will get out of the model, any drawing, picture, view will be just frozen, and it will miss a lot of information. So just if you share the models with people, then you will share everything. Nobody will miss anything. It will be there no matter what. So why not?
So one important sort of tip is to start thinking in terms of models. Are there other advices that you could give to people out there listening and wondering how to get started, what to do, what's my next step, what am I going to do tomorrow when I wake up?
So, I mean, it's about digitalization, really. BIM is part of digitalization. So I would say you have an enormous wealth of information and techniques and tools available on your telephone, on your computer. Really start using and being curious about how you can get more out of those sorts of technology. Specifically for BIM, what we used to do in SKANSKA in the early days of BIM is we used a lot of the free viewer software, and we'd go to the architect and say, well, look, I know that you've done a model here. Can you share the model with us? You know, it's not in the contract, but we want to see it anyway because we think it's useful. So, you know, like Julien was saying, ask for that model and don't take no for an answer. And people are sometimes afraid to share these things because they're concerned that, oh, the model's not quite ready, or maybe they're going to steal some information from me. But that's not what it's about. It's about the way that BIM has changed the way we work, is that we can work more collaboratively without risking contractual loss, is my belief. So really, don't take no for an answer. Give me that model and let's see what we can do with it together.
I really like that advice of sharing, and it's also part of why we do Bimcast, is to share knowledge, allow others to learn from those who have pioneered and go before, then done all the mistakes and whatever, so that it, you know, next sort of wave can move faster and learn from each other. And it's just like when you're a construction company, you have some ideas on how to do things, and then the owner has some ideas on how to do things, and that kind of collaboration moves things forward in an innovative way. So thank you, both of you. Do you have any last things that you want to sort of mention or talk about or say?
Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for the opportunity for doing a podcast together. I'll happily do it again.
Very good. Julien, do you have any last things you want to?
Yeah, well, I have a goal in my career, is to change a bit the construction industry into. I don't think we are less smart than other industries, and the guys that are building cars nowadays, they look at us like babies because they did what we are doing 30 years ago, and I don't think we are less smart than them. So I would just want to prove that we are smart too. So let's do it.
I like that a lot, and thank you both, Rupert and Julien, for coming here to Bimcast and sharing your knowledge. It's a privilege to sit and listen to all the knowledge that you have, all the experience you've done, and I'm pretty convinced that you guys will do exactly that. You will show the world that you are not stupid. We can do this. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.